In today's video, I will be taking a look at every single race I got wrong in this midterm election. I will be taking a look at the Senate, governors, and House elections in specifically the states I got wrong. I will not be touching the states that I did predict accurately. I'm going to start off with the House. I'm just going to have a brief cover here. So, my final House prediction, I believe, was somewhere around 240 to 195. It was not very definitive, but that was around my House projection. I did get about 20 seats wrong, which is kind of embarrassing, but many of those races were just a general overestimation of the Republican Party. Some notable races I got wrong that I really shouldn't have. I got some of the very not really that competitive seats wrong. I shouldn't have gotten a seat like Ohio's ninth wrong. I should have probably seen how Democrats may be able to perform better than what I expected, but I mean, most people overestimated the Republicans this cycle. Who could have thought that Washington's third would have gone Democratic? Who could have thought that Colorado's third district will not be called 2 weeks after the election? 1.5 weeks, or more than 10 days. Actually, it is 2 weeks. It has been 2 weeks. It's not even called on the New York Times. So, clearly, it was a overestimation of the Republican Party. I do take responsibility for that, but also many people did get the House wrong. And I'm going to be taking a look at the Senate and governor races, specifically the races I got wrong. For the Senate, I projected a 53 to 47 Senate at the end. Now, Georgia, we're not quite sure it's going to go to runoff, but it looks good for the Democrats. Now, let's talk about the final three remaining races. The first off is the state of Nevada. Now, Nevada was very close. If we look at the state of Nevada, it was within the point. It was 0.9% for Catherine Cortez Masto, the incumbent. Now, this race did have a split ballot. Governor-elect Joe Lombardo won, but Catherine Cortez Masto, the incumbent senator who won re-election, did win. It was only a 9,000 vote margin. However, it was still a win regardless. If we look at the 2020 comparison, we can see that basically Washoe County and Clark County both trended to the Republican Party, but it was not enough. Adam Laxalt did pretty well, but it was not enough to ultimately secure Nevada to the Republican Party. Now, the big problem was just a general Republican overestimation. I did not think that Democrats were going to have necessarily a close election. If we look at the generic ballot, Republicans did win the House by 3, but there were many races Democrats did not contest. Regardless, it did. It was not as good of an election as I thought it was going to be for Republicans. So they did win the generic ballot by 3. They did poorly in some of the races that truly mattered, and that was the theme of this election. Going to the next state, the state of Arizona. Now, this race I probably shouldn't have got wrong because Mark Kelly did win by 4%, a decently impressive margin. And really, he did win Maricopa by 6. I did not expect that. Because of the polling data actually shrinking when we got closer to the election, and really 2020 getting the election wrong, I really thought that Blake Masters was going to win. The polling data was closer to this election than the last election. I thought even if Blake Masters didn't win, he would make it within a point, but Mark Kelly did win it by 4, which I should have saw coming, but again, overestimating the Republican Party was a general theme of this election, on my side and on many people's side. Now looking at the final race that I got wrong, Pennsylvania, which John Fetterman. Fetterman did win by 5, more than 255,000 votes in Pennsylvania. Now if we look at the trend here, Democrats did do very well. They did very well in Allegheny, where his primary challenger primarily was Connor Lamb. He was from that county, but he did still 7.6 points better than Joe Biden. He did 8.5 points better than Joe Biden in Erie County. The only area that he didn't really overperform Biden in was the suburban areas surrounding Philadelphia, but he did do much better than Joe Biden in Philadelphia County. So it was that the Democrats did do very well here. The polling data at the final day showed Mehmet Oz ahead of John Fetterman. However, they were way off. They overestimated the Republicans by 5-6 points, just like what I did. I had Oz winning by 3 because I thought the polling data would have overestimated John Fetterman. But they ended up overestimating Mehmet Oz, which was really truly surprising in my opinion. Now, those were the 3 races I got wrong in the Senate, and we have Georgia. Georgia I probably would get wrong because I do think that at this point Raphael Warnock is favored because of how many people are voting for Herschel Walker simply because they want the Senate to go Republican, but now the Senate is not at stake, it could be harder for Herschel Walker. Okay, now we have the Senate done, we're going to close the tab. Now let's go to the governors. We had 4 states wrong. It wasn't as bad as I initially thought, but it was still not very great. So for the state of Oregon here, I'm just going to go to governors. Now, Oregon really was a state that it's understandable that anyone would get this race wrong because there was a independent. And if we look at the trend there, many people expected to get the independent to get 15% or so of the vote. If we look at just about a week before the election, FiveThirtyEight had Beasley Johnson at 17% of the vote. And guess where those votes would come from? Most of them would come from Tina Kotek. And a very powerful individual in the state of Oregon gave Beasley Johnson $4.5 million, gave the Republicans $1.8 million to defeat Tina Kotek. But ultimately, that money did not last. Ultimately, Republicans lost by a very close margin. But it was a loss at the end of the day. And the next state I will be talking about is the state of Arizona. Now, Arizona is very close. Arizona is currently just a 0.66% margin for Katie Hobbs over Kara Lake. It was only 17,000 votes, but it was more than the 2020 margin. What did I get wrong? Again, overestimating the Republicans was a common theme in my predictions and in many people's predictions in this election cycle. But Katie Hobbs was able to win Maricopa County. That was not something I expected. Katie Hobbs was a much worse candidate than Mark Kelly. She did underperform Mark Kelly by close to 4 points, but in the end that wouldn't matter. Kari Lake did end up losing by a very narrow margin, but she did lose. Now 2 more races. The state of Kansas. Now Kansas, it's a very red state. It's a state that you typically don't expect a Democrat to win in. Where's Kansas? Here you go. So Laura Kelly, I didn't expect to win this race. I never thought she was gonna really win. She won in 2018 in extreme circumstances. She was facing Chris Kobach, a terrible candidate. There was a independent that split away 7% of the vote that mostly would have gone Republican. And she was not at 50%. She won by a likely margin, but she was not at 50%. It was 2018, a Democratic wave year. All those circumstances went for her, and it was very hard to see that in 2022, those circumstances would have went for her again. But her popularity won her the race. There was still close to 1 million votes cast. But she was able to win Wichita. She was able to do very well in the Johnson County area and the suburbs of the state of Kansas. And it really bordering the Kansas City area in the state of Missouri. So what necessarily went wrong here? I overestimated Derek Schmidt because I thought Kansas, in not really extreme circumstances, would always elect a Republican, even if the Democrat is popular. We saw that in many races in Republican wave years, such as 2014, 2010, Democrats lost a bunch of races. Especially 2014, they lost popular incumbents in the Senate. But I forgot that the governor races were really more local, and people were typically happy to split ballot. We saw that in Vermont, obviously. We saw that in New Hampshire. Laura Kelly did well. She did do well. And most people didn't see that coming. But she did win at the end of the day. Finally, the state of Wisconsin. This was the huge shocker. I mean, this was probably the most vulnerable Democratic incumbent. Tony Evers really had a very tough race. He was a governor that supported COVID restrictions, not very popular in the current days. He was Democrat that actually was like a regular Democrat. He tried to pass a lot of bills that really were not that popular. But and we had the Senate race there. Ron Johnson was easily expected to win. Now that was one of the parts of the story that fell off. Ron Johnson, in my last prediction, had him up by a likely margin. He won by 1 percentage point, which was really disappointing for Republicans. He won by 1%. Well, he was expected to win by about 5 or 6%, but Delaware Barnes also did far better. And that contributed to the Republicans really not doing well in the state of Wisconsin. Tony Evers outperformed Biden in practically all the counties. This race was less close than the Senate race in terms of percentage-wise. Ron Johnson only won the state of Wisconsin by 20,000 votes. Tony Evers won the state of Wisconsin by more than 90,000 votes. That's math there, and really, it was that Republicans didn't turn out. We didn't see high Republican turnout in some of the Republican counties. And that hurt the Republican Party tremendously in this election. And ultimately, they lost this race. This was definitely the largest shocker in terms of a governor race this election. Anyways, thank you for watching today's video. Be sure to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel here. I make prediction videos. I will be making more videos about the Georgia runoffs, the 2023 election cycle, and obviously 2024. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day. Goodbye.